physically, relationally, and spiritually. So we're going to be talking about the reality of unforgiveness, the true reason that we should forgive, and then how forgiveness restores us. First, we must remember the reality of unforgiveness, which is that left unchecked, unforgiveness leads to bitterness. Author Joanna Weaver once noted, bitterness is like drinking poison and then waiting for the other person to die. You see, as Corrie stood before the guard, she remembered the home that she had established in Holland for the victims of the Nazis. She recounted that, quote, those who were able to forgive their former enemies were able also to return to the outside world and rebuild their lives. Those who nursed their bitterness remained invalids. It was as simple and horrible as that. Quote. Bitterness has serious consequences. And it's not even just for us. The Bible warns us in Hebrews 12, verse 15, quote, that we should be looking diligently lest any man fail of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springing up trouble you, and thereby many be defiled. You see, one person's bitterness towards another person in their church could lead to two groups or factions as members gather friends to support their side. And thus, instead of unity, there is division. Maybe even a church split. Our bitterness doesn't just affect us. It hurts those around us. And so the Bible warns us in Ephesians 4:26-27, let not the sun go down upon your wrath, neither give place to the devil. Because when we allow our minds to be filled with hateful thoughts, we give Satan a place, like a handle in our lives, that he can use to pry our relationships apart. This is not something that should be taken lightly. And Corrie remembered another verse, Matthew 6:15, which says, but if ye forgive not men their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses. Unforgiveness is not some insignificant issue. To God, it can be a serious relationship block. Okay, you say, sure. Unforgiveness is not the best thing in the world. But that person really hurt me. I mean, if you knew what they did to me. That's what I'll be talking about next. The true reason that we should forgive. One thing to keep in mind is that many times, the other person didn't even realize that they hurt us. Perhaps we take a remark personally that the other person would just brush off without even considering whether or not it's true. And so they don't realize that they hurt us. But if this happens to us, couldn't we also have unintentionally and unknowingly hurt other people ourselves? So that's one reason to forgive. But I'm sure that there are other times where that other person knowingly hurt you. And so you ask, why do I have to forgive them? Why do they deserve my forgiveness when they were in the wrong? I think a better question that we should all ask ourselves is what makes me more deserving of forgiveness than them? We were all lost, rebellious sinners. We were all going our own way and rejecting God. He was a holy, just, and righteous God who had to punish our sin. Yet in love, He sent His Son, Jesus Christ, to die for us. Sacrificing the glory of heaven, Jesus came to pay for our sin. And Luke 23:34 tells us that while Jesus was on the cross, He looked down at those who were mocking and jeering and crucifying Him and said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. No one took as much rejection, as much hate, as much hurt as Jesus. Yet He still offers forgiveness freely to all who will receive it. Christ is our example. Colossians 3:13 admonishes us, if any man have a quarrel against any, even as Christ forgave you, so also do ye. And Romans 5:10 reminds us that Christ died for us when we were enemies. So we should obey His command in Matthew 5:44, love your enemies. It is interesting to note that the first 8 letters of forgiveness spell out forgiven. True forgiveness starts with remembering how much we ourselves have been forgiven. We must get rid of our self-righteous pride and humbly forgive those who have hurt us. The fact is, none of us deserve forgiveness, but we all need it. And may we never be like that unforgiving servant in Matthew 18, who after having been forgiven an unpayable debt, refused to show mercy to his own servant for a comparatively minuscule offense. So we've seen the reality of unforgiveness and the true reason that we should forgive. Now let's look at how forgiveness restores us, physically, relationally, and spiritually. Now we know from the home in Holland that people who do not forgive their enemies suffer physically. But according to the Mayo Clinic, Forgiving can lead to lower blood pressure, less symptoms of depression, less anxiety, stress, and hostility, and an improved heart health. And not only does forgiving restore us physically, it also can restore our relationships. As Gregory Jones, a former dean of Duke Divinity School, wrote of forgiveness, quote, "A Christian account of forgiveness ought not to be simply or even primarily focused on the absolution of guilt, but rather it ought to be focused on the reconciliation of brokenness, the restoration of communion." In other words, when we forgive those who have hurt us, we shouldn't be focused on excusing their guilt. Rather, we should be focused on trying to restore our relationship with that other person. As Corrie stood before the guard, she remembered how much she had been forgiven, but didn't have the courage to forgive. Mechanically, she thrust out her hand and asked God for the power to forgive. She later recounted what happened. Quote, "An incredible thing took place. The current started in my shoulder, raced down my arm, and sprang into our joined hands. A healing warmth seemed to fill my entire being. I forgive you, brother, with all my heart. I had never known God's love so intensely as I did then." No, forgiveness is not easy, but God will give us the grace that we need. And forgiveness can also restore us spiritually in our relationship with God. Because in contrast to Matthew 6:15, which says that unforgiveness will severely hurt our relationship with God, Mark 10:25 says, "And when ye stand praying, forgive, if ye have aught against any, that your Father which is in heaven may also forgive you your trespasses." So when we forgive those who have hurt us, we become more like Christ, who is our example of forgiveness, and we have a renewed relationship with God. Today we've seen the ugly reality of unforgiveness. Unforgiveness leads to bitterness and even severed relationships. But we also saw the true reason that we should forgive, because we ourselves have been forgiven far more. And we saw that forgiveness restores us physically, relationally, and spiritually. Forgiveness is a powerful thing. No, forgiveness is not easy, but God will give us the grace that we need to forgive. Now, if you're here today and you say, "Well, I've already forgiven everybody," then I urge you to take it a step farther. Matthew 5:44 continues, "Bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you." So even if you've already forgiven that other person, take it a step farther. Look for ways that you can reach out to them and minister to them and show the love of God to them. Because when you respond to their hate with love, they can see the difference that Christ makes in a life. But if you're here today and there's someone that you need to forgive, then I urge you today, don't even wait for them to ask. I urge you today to forgive that person who has hurt you. Not because it is easy. It isn't easy, but because it is right. Not because they deserve it, but because they don't. Thank you so much for judging. Thank you so much for judging.